Good evening, everyone. It's Monday, December 7th, just after 7 o'clock. I was going to call the special council agenda to order. We can all remove our masks at this point as we're all safely settled into the room. Just want to start by acknowledging that we are having this meeting on the traditional territories of the Coast and the Strait Salish peoples, specifically the Lekwungen-speaking people, known today as the Esquimalt and the Songhees First Nations, and just recognize that their connections to these lands continue to this day. Obviously, these proceedings are being webcast and will be available for future viewing on the website. I also just want to point out, if anybody wishes to call into the public participation period, that number is 250-598-3311. That's 598-3311, and we'll be up to that as agenda item number 4, which should happen in just a few minutes. Item first on the agenda.
A point of procedure, please.
Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Chair. I can barely hear you. You sound very far away. Just wondering if your microphone is on.
My microphone is on, but I will speak up a little bit. Is that easier to hear?
Oh, that's better. Thank you.
Okay, I will speak louder. Thank you. Up first, we have council and committee minutes. I just need to do a little bit of jumping around procedurally here on these ones. We had an earlier council meeting, as you see, from February 10th. That had captured only part of the pages. So the procedure here would be to rescind that, and then we would just approve February 10th and then the 2 November meetings as one fell piece. So my first thing I would need is a motion to rescind the original February 10th council meeting minutes.
Move to rescind.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Only one can put their microphone on at a time, just a reminder of people. And is there any discussion? And I'm just going to leave it to people on the phone. If you wish to say something, just jump in, okay? Any further?
Sounds fine.
Okay, any discussion? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Councillor
Yes.
Green? Okay, Councillor Zelka?
Yes.
Okay, so that's now rescinded. Can I get a motion to approve February 10th, 16th, and 23rd, and then we'll do. Moved, thank you.
Second.
Moved and seconded, thank you. Are there any changes or corrections of any of those 3 minutes? I don't see any. I will call the question. All of those in favor? Councillor Green?
Yes.
Councillor Zelka?
In favor.
Thank you very much. Up next on the agenda, we have item number 2 is the advisory body minutes. And sorry, Ms. Williams, just I didn't put it in my notes here. Would these be to receive or to approve the receipt of the design panel? Thank you. Can I get a motion to receive these minutes? Moved and seconded. Thank you. Is there any changes, corrections? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Councillor Green?
Yes.
Councillor Zelka?
In favor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I have not a lot under my mayor's remarks, but I just want to remind again anybody who's watching who wishes to participate in the public participation period, the phone number is 250-598-3311. This would be the appropriate time to call in if you haven't done so already, 250-598-3311. I also just want to say we are managing this a little bit different. You may see us in these chambers or more remotely, depending a little bit on what the public health orders are, but it looks like we're probably going to be maintaining this effort of trying to meet, but with extreme safety measures in place through the end of this month. I also just want to express our appreciation to the Business Improvement Association. There is, and encourage anybody watching to donate to the food hamper that the BIA has set up in front of the Municipal Hall. And if you haven't used it, there's a little Santa selfie app that you can use to take pictures of yourself or friends with Santa in the village. It's quite unique and fun to do a little augmented reality. And of course, all of our businesses are still open and appreciating your business during the holiday season. So thank you very much. Up next is public participation period, item number 4 on our agenda. We have a maximum of 20 minutes in total for this item, but that presumes people will call in and speak to us. Is there anybody who's called in, Ms. Williams?
There's nobody at this time.
Okay, I will leave it again since I just asked. I will just wait for another 15 seconds or so, and I'll use that to dig out a pen from my bag so I have that.
While we're waiting, just wanted to ask if I may, is this being webcasted and is the webcast live?
It is being webcast, Councillor Zilka, and it is live. And
Thank
Ms. Williams, has there been anybody who's called in?
No callers, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll move on to item number 5 on the agenda, which is our Community Climate Action Working Group report. We believe we have Ms. Jensen on the phone to do an introduction, and then we can take questions from members of council. Go ahead, Ms. Jensen, and welcome.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. So just as a bit of background, in late 2019, Council established the Community Climate Action Working Group with the purpose of having their group develop up to 5 recommendations for climate action projects. Those projects the district could then consider as part of the 2020-2022 strategic planning and budget process. The working group began discussions immediately following Council's approval of their terms of reference, and their meetings were occurring through to March of 2020, so earlier this year. The group framed their sessions around an overall vision and a set of guiding principles, with an overarching principle that the district should play a leadership role in impacting climate change. So out of a total of 14 draft recommendations that they developed, the working group finalized the first 3 of their recommendations, and those were presented to Council last February. Those included looking at the completion of the active transportation network within Oak Bay. It looked at initiating a neighborhood engagement program for community initiatives through the Cool Kit program, and it looked at establishing an annual funding program for grants and rebates that directly address climate action initiatives. So those 3 recommendations, again, were presented earlier this year, and Council incorporated those into the 2020 budget process. The final 2 recommendations of the working group are presented here tonight. So the 4th recommendation out of the 5 is quite comprehensive, and it speaks to establishing programs and policies that accelerate greenhouse gas and energy reductions for both new and existing buildings. No specific programs were identified, but it could include, for example, implementing higher levels of the BC Energy Step Code or developing educational programs to encourage building upgrades from residents themselves. The final recommendation, the 5th, is specific to local transit, with the goal of doubling transit usage within the next 5 years. As part of that transit program is suggested developing a 4-month trial period where free bus passes would be provided to the youth of Oak Bay. In each of these instances, those 2 recommendations, there would be both financial and staffing implications. At this point, it's difficult for staff to provide Council an accurate opinion as to what those implications might be. Much of that would be contingent upon the programs and the timelines ultimately selected by Council. So should Council wish to incorporate these 2 final recommendations into the 2021 budget discussions, they could direct staff to bring back additional information on the process and the resources required. And with that, I will turn it back to Council.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jensen. And just, I think procedurally here, the best thing I think we can do is just, we'll take questions, and then we'll take a motion to receive the report, and then we can have the motions on the 2 items, and we can have debate specific on those 2 items. If anybody wishes to expand the questions or comments in the early part, we're more than happy to accommodate that as well in this meeting. So with that, are there any questions of Ms. Jensen or staff in general? Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. I'm just wondering, as far as the bus pass program goes, do we have any idea what the cost of something like that might be?
Ms. Jensen?
Thank you, Your Worship. Difficult to anticipate at this time. So what we do know is if we were offering it to all youth within the district between the ages of 5 and 19, that's a population of just over 2,800 people. So working with BC Transit, it would really depend on the type of program that we utilized. There is a program that they use called the UPass, which is similar to what the City of Victoria is going to be using. They look at a more substantial discount program, but it is based on the number of passes that you would be buying, and then those get forwarded on to the youth. So that's a set monthly cost. Alternatively, you could look at just a bulk discount program that doesn't offer as much of a discount, but you're only restricted to them looking at a minimum of 100 passes per month. So that could vary anywhere between $4,000 and $114,000 a month, depending on what council might want to look at. But if council was interested in doing something, we could certainly bring back additional information on that.
Thank you, Ms. Jensen. And just for clarity, the UPass program requires it to be purchased for every person within that class. It has to be administered by the agency that's running it. So in case of schools or businesses, that would be the requirement, or in our case, the municipality. Go ahead. Anything else? Sorry, Councillor Braithwaite?
No, I was just hoping to be able to kind of do the math to see what that cost might be on a yearly basis, but I guess we'll have to wait for the report to come back for that.
Sure, and I can a rough measure of that. If there's 2,800 youth and the pass was purchased, it'd be around $30,000 a month. That'd be the rough number.
So $30,000 a month is approximately $3,000 or $300,000 a year, which
Yep.
is approximately just over 1% of our tax, I guess. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you. And as a follow-up to that, is there any information out of the city of Victoria about what the uptake in their program has been since they've implemented it? And further to that, then, how do you develop the benchmarks by which you would monitor the performance of this program? Certainly, with the 100 pass per month, that would be relatively easy, because you would then, I think, understand quite quickly how many were issued in a month. But it would be nice to have some baseline data so that you could really understand what the take up in the program was.
Sure, thank you. Ms. Rella, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Your Worship. So these are very good questions that councillors are bringing forward. I think the item before council tonight is to really say, do you wish staff to go and do those kinds of research pieces? Because they are significant, and those are the kinds of things that we actually want at least high-level direction from council prior to staff undertaking that with an already full plate. So again, we know there's limited information before you, but the question is, do you want us to go do that work and bring a more robust discussion back during budget and strategic planning process?
Thank you, Ms. Rella. And I think if the answers are readily available, we'll try and get them here, because it's to give some order of magnitude assessment of whether it's worth putting that time in. I can tell answer to Ms. Councillor Patterson's question. Unfortunately, really the pandemic interceded before there was really meaningful data back from the City of Victoria in terms of the uptake or the impacts of the cost. They are also moving away from their current model, which is buying passes per person as is requested, and moving to the UPass model, where they're bulk buying it for everybody and mailing them out to people as requested. So it's a little bit of it can't really pull too much at this point from their experience. Are there any other questions, Councillor Renee?
Yeah, thank you, through Mayor. And I'll just try and keep the questions focused. I really recognize what Ms. Varela has just spoken about. We're going to ask questions, and then whether we ask staff to do a report. So on the recommendation 4, I'm just curious about implementing higher levels. Let's say it was the will of the council to initiate higher levels of the BC Energy STEP code. What would that mean, and how is that done? And is there a cost to that? And what level would we be possibly going to if we did that? Maybe that's just something we need more information, but is that a fair question for you?
Yeah, I think this should go to Ms. Jensen, just for if she has a ready answer, recognizing that there is. I think the scope of that ask is so broad. This is just one possible. But Ms. Jensen, do you have a sense? We just recently approved incremental step codes. Perhaps you have some knowledge about the other optional steps that we may get to.
Well, the simple answer is that the BC step code as it stands today has a total of 5 levels attached to it. The district is currently sitting at step code level 3. To go higher than that, the simple answer is that we would take a bylaw amendment forward to council to amend our building bylaw to go to a higher number. A larger picture, the district was really trying to coordinate with the City of Victoria, the District of Saanich, so that we were all sitting at the same level, so that it was easier for the local contractors in the area, so that they're all working with the same information. That doesn't mean that we have to be there, but that's the rationale for why we're currently at step level 3.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Mayor, I have a question related to one of the other items that's not before us, but there is a line there that staff says that if we have a particular question, that we could direct staff to bring a report regarding those 3. So I'm just wondering, is that part of this discussion now, or do you want us to stay on 4 and 5?
Well, you can ask a question and we'll just see where that takes us. Go ahead, Councillor Ney.
So on the number 2 around the neighborhood engagement program, there's been problems because of the COVID, which is understandable, and I understand staff has been in discussions with a potential candidate who's going to do the engagement work. But staff says here that they could bring forward a report that would outline engagement options, given the discussions that have been underway. And I'm wondering if you could just give us a clue what kinds of things that are being contemplated if we didn't move forward and the COVID continued to be a barrier to implementing that particular initiative.
Thank you, Councillor Ney. Ms. Jensen, I believe you've been involved in that process. Do you have an answer for what sort of options might be possible?
Yes and no. I would definitely have to get more information from the Parks Department. What I do know is that park staff are continuing to work with the University of British Columbia, which is where the Cool Kit program originates from, to determine what kind of at least online engagement opportunities we might be able to look at, so long as we're still under the COVID protocols. I do know that there's actually a webinar over the next couple of days that they are going to be looking at some of these issues specifically. So I would imagine we would have additional information for you sooner than later should council wish us to bring something forward.
So just for clarification then, Ms. Jensen, is that work proceeding currently then, or is it waiting for anything from council at this point?
Work has not yet proceeded, but we are still continuing to work behind the scenes in terms of what we might be able to accomplish. So we're still looking at options within the COVID world.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Go ahead, Councillor Ney.
Okay, through you, Mayor, and to staff again. Going back to recommendation 4, staff has made some suggestions about the kinds of interventions that could be developed, and I'm wondering, I'm wondering if staff has any information about the status of various sort of umbrella legislations that were pending, like the PACE program and any of the, there's a sort of suite of other kinds of retrofit incentives that were to be initiated by the provincial government, and I'm wondering if staff has any information about the status of that and whether that would be a consideration were Oak Bay to consider implementing any of these initiatives. Like what I'm trying to get at, would there be any value if they were close to, say, rolling out the PACE program and sort of making use of that as an incentive program for retrofit and renovation, rather than Oak Bay taking that on themselves in terms of programming?
Ms. Jensen?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think I would have to come back to council with additional information on that. I know there are a number of programs that the province is looking at, particularly through the Clean BC program. With the election, the provincial election just having finished, I know there's been some shuffling around. I'd really have to come back with additional information for you.
More question, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah,
And
go.
actually, this is to Councillor Appleton. I was curious about one of the recommendations that just made me rethink it, given the challenges of recommendation 5. And, we've seen this recommendation previously that it was intended to implement programs and policies to double transit use. And I'm just thinking with the challenges of the bus passes and the COVID, et cetera, was the focus specifically, I'm imagining it was to be focused on addressing transit usage as the metric. But was it as much about a mode shift as well, or was it really just very specific to transit use as the metric?
Thank you, Councillor Ney. If you can, Councillor Upland, feel free to answer.
Thank you, Your Worship, and a reasonable question. I think that the tenor of the discussion at the table was very much one of mode shift as far as alternative transportation, recognizing that at the local government level, the biggest impacts we can make are with regards to transportation, with regards to housing. So the active transportation recommendation, which is recommendation number 1, is part of that. And then recommendation 5 is very much allied with that in terms of how people choose to get around. I think it did have a transit focus, but I think it has equally to do with the design of the community in order to facilitate transit use. So how the community develops and redevelops, for instance, along bus routes in order to facilitate people's use of buses and people's use of even the existing transit network. So it is that overlap between the built environment and how people choose to transport themselves. What I will say is that, so that was the larger scale picture, but the discussion specifically around the provision of bus passes, because at the time of the launch of this conversation, it was very much a new conversation or a live conversation, a new program essentially at the City of Victoria level, which I think that the participants in the Climate Action Work Group were quite interested in and to see how it would play out. So there was definitely a very strong feel, and members were quite adamant that the provision of this trial, at least giving the concept a try and participating in that trial in some way, was something that had a lot of value. So I would be remiss if I didn't communicate, the very clear message that I heard from the Climate Action Work Group, that a trial period of bus passes for youth was something that they were quite keen on exploring. And with the idea that mode shift and mode selection that is introduced early in life is something that will tend to stick with people. And I would make the argument that in time of COVID, that becomes actually even more important because people will have a disinclination towards public transit. It'll take a little while for that to bounce back. And obviously there's been fears raised about people transiting to private automobiles as they don't feel safe with transit. So I would like to see us support the use of ongoing use of transit.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Councillor Ney, good. I'm going to go to first-time speakers first, if I will. Councillor Appleton, did you have any other questions you wish to raise? Wait, okay. I'm just going to go. Councillor Green, did you have any questions?
I have a couple of questions and comments. First of all, on item number 2 that Councillor Ney referenced, which was the Cool Kit program, I have had some concerns since the pandemic issue arose about the viability of doing this program in Oak Bay. I'm just wondering, through you, Mayor, to Ms. Jensen, has there been an opportunity to consider how we might deliver this and adapt this program locally? Because I know we do have community leaders in Oak Bay, such as Gary McDougall, who do incredible work on climate change and climate change activities. So would it be possible to pivot, if we had to, and adapt the program locally using local community leaders to roll out the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Ms. Jensen?
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, I'll defer to getting additional information from Parks. What I do know, however, is that a lot of those local people that the Councillor Green's referring to are still continuing to show interest in the Cool Kit program, as our staff. So we are still eagerly awaiting being able to go forward with this. But again, it's that first step of looking at how we can undertake some of these activities under the umbrella of COVID, and then ultimately, hopefully, at some point in time, we'll be back to the new normal, and we'll actually be able to facilitate more of that traditional Cool Kit program. But in the interim, we're looking at other alternatives to start working on some of those activities.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Go ahead, Councillor
my
Green.
other question relates to item number 4. That's the bus pass program suggestion, and I appreciate the comments from Councillor Appleton, as well as the questions from other councillors. I guess my concern here is, I know that the City of Victoria has had some logistical issues rolling out that program, and I also know that transit, as Councillor Appleton mentioned, has been affected adversely by the pandemic situation. People are not as comfortable on buses as they once were. And I'm just wondering, again, in the context of our own concerns around revenue and resources, financial resources, and of course staff capacity, is this, in principle, it's a great idea, but I'm just wondering if it's realistic under all the circumstances. And so I'm just wondering, I think we're going to get further information from staff on this one, but I just have to say I'm struggling with it for the reasons I've stated. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We will have a motion on that coming up, and then we can have a debate about that in particular. So I'm taking sort of more or less general questions right now, and the comments on the items 4 and 5 I think are probably best left to that time that we get to those motions. So, Councillor Jelka, did you have any questions?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I do have at least a comment. First of all, I do want to support the comments of my council colleagues. This is a very important program, and I do look forward to the report coming forward, detailing in particular the cost of recommendations 4 and 5. Because, of course, we do have to be careful with the cost, but at the same time, we all want to be able to breathe the air. So I definitely would like to see this move forward somehow. I was wondering, although I think I've already got the answer, that as to whether the BC Energy Step Code could apply to renovations, and I've confirmed that it does not. Mainly because of renovations are not quite full systems-wide. But I do notice that the Clean BC website has some very interesting rebates and how do I say this, grants available. I did want to take this opportunity to point out through this public forum that at the Clean BC website, a double the rebate offer program is available up until the end of December 31st, 2020. Up to $8,300 is available today to renovate your house. I guess COVID-19 is bringing some very interesting incentives for those of us who are stuck at home. So I did want to use that opportunity to encourage people to go to that website and see what might be suitable for their own homes. So thank you. I'll leave it at that and look forward to the report coming forward.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Zelka. I think we'll just start just by having a receipt of the report. If we can just get a motion to receive.
Move receipt.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on that receipt? I'm not hearing any, so I will call the question. All those in favor? Councillor Green?
Yes.
Councillor Zelka?
In favor, yes.
Okay, that completes that. Then we have two items. One is the grant for the item number 4. I'll just leave it at that. And I think an appropriate motion here would be to recommend moving it to for a staff report to come back to as part of the budgeting and and strategic planning process. I can either be a motion for or against that, but I think we need some clarity in terms of what we want to do with this recommendation. Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
I'm sorry.
No, Councillor Appleton has the floor, and I'll go to anybody else after that.
Your Worship, I will make the motion to direct staff to prepare a report as part of the 2021 budget cycle on the cost and resource implications of recommendation number 4.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Go ahead. Thank you, Councillor Ney. Just because I sort of had to cut off Councillor Zelka, I'm just going to go to him if he has anything procedural here. Otherwise, I'll let you motivate Councillor Appleton. Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Yes, a procedural question. There was a recommended wording in the report. Are we deviating from that recommended wording?
Good question, and let me just bring it back up. I closed my my agenda piece here, so let me just bring it back up again so we can.
And if we are deviating, I just wanted to know why, because I couldn't tell.
Councillor Appleton, was your intention to move the motion that was in the report?
Well, just in terms of the options presented in the report, Your Worship, it sort of lumps the two together, recommendation 4 and 5 together as a group. And so my understanding was that it might be better to move separate motions for each of recommendation 4 and 5 and debate each independently.
Yeah. I feel that is the better, clearer way of doing it. So I took your motion to be quite clear. So thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I think that Council has, has read and reviewed and sees the intent of recommendation number 4. Again, just to reiterate, these are community climate actions. So these are actions which the district can take to encourage improvements in the community's greenhouse gas emissions. And again, the two most significant areas where the district can make impacts in that regard are in housing and in transportation. So these two things they are directly related to that. The discussion around the table at the Climate Action Work Group was very much around better standards for new buildings and incentives for older buildings, to that we could incentivize the retention of some of our older buildings which we value so much but are not energy efficient in a significant way. That presented an incentive to both retain older houses and also increase their energy efficiency. So I'm very much interested in hearing from staff on the resource implications, their options. I have great faith in staff for coming up with some really good options for us. And as several councillors have mentioned, there are other incentive programs already in place, as has been mentioned, and more than likely other incentive programs coming down the pipe that residents will be able to take advantage of. So I feel this is really an opportunity to get ahead of the curve on this. It may not necessarily be a huge resource allocation for us, but to have a program ready in order to plug into other incentives is valuable.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Is there any other questions or discussion? Actually, I have a question up front here. I note in the report that Ms. Jensen, that these were both flagged as being outside of the original scope of the working group mandate. It seems like most of this would be included in the original sort of mandate of community actions, but there is some aspect of it that isn't. Can you just explain to the body, and mostly to me, I guess, how this deviates from the, is it just a timeline issue from the original mandate given to the working group?
Thank you, Your Worship. So the original mandate, their terms of reference, did include some wording in it, just for the group to kind of be aware of both financial and staffing resources as they develop their recommendations. So the group as well recognized that with these last two recommendations, that they were likely going up beyond the scope of that a little bit, depending upon the programs that that council wishes to pursue. So, for example, with the transit program, recognizing that there's a substantial cost developing the transit program. Within the building program, looking at what you might actually need in terms of staffing resources or the financial resources to develop one or more of the programs. So we've provided some examples to you through the report, but depending upon what council chooses they want to move forward with, one, two, or any, we'll have to determine what the impact on resources might look like for those. I hope that answers your question.
I think it does. Thank you very much. We have a motion. Go ahead, Councillor Patterson.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And follow up to that, I noticed that the Climate Action Working Group did include in their report the limited resourcing that we have on our staff, the capacity that we have on our staff, and did propose that depending on what was decided here, that it might be advisable to have a climate coordinator position added to staff. I do know that in Saanich, they do have a climate action specialist at about $140 a year in their budgets. And I am wondering if there was any discussion at the Climate Action Working Group with anybody from Saanich, or if there was any consideration of synergies that may be able to be shared by both communities as part of this. I don't know certainly what they're doing with their climate action specialists that they are using, but it would seem certainly if there are issues around climate action items that affect building code items for housing and grants available to homeowners, that would certainly turn up in Saanich, and perhaps it's a program that we could share some of that knowledge and perhaps economize costs and resources. I'm wondering if that was looked at all.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. I think that was definitely outside of the framework of the working group to look at other group staffing, but Councillor Appleton, if you have an answer at hand, you're more than welcome to. Otherwise, we can.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess I would just take the opportunity to say it was definitely a real present discussion at the Climate Action Work in terms of staff capacity. I as liaison, was very careful to communicate to the working group about the limitations of staff capacity, so that they were definitely well apprised of that, well aware of that, and thus the recommendation to evaluate the climate coordinator in the future. I also communicated very directly that we are in the middle of a strategic HR review, as was mentioned in the report, and so I did present some caution, or at least some ask the working group to sort of operate with that in mind, that process was underway, and so it would be difficult to have that come forward as a recommendation itself, given that review is underway. So that it's a challenge, because at some point we will reach a level of tasking for climate-related initiatives that will require additional resources like that. That's clear. I guess what I would say in terms of regional sharing, I've been part of the CRD Climate Action Work Group, and Ms. Jensen participates on the staff side of that initiative. There's some real positive information sharing that goes on there as well. So I've got every confidence in Ms. Jensen to be able to pick up some of that good work that's being done in other regions and bringing it back to us.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Councillor Patterson?
Yes, thank you. I think that's helpful, and it's good to know that some of these, at least preliminary side discussions, took place, and that there is ongoing conversations in the region about those things. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Ney?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that I think this is a really important initiative for our community, because so much of our GHGs are probably coming, as Councillor Appleton said, it's both transportation and trying to create energy efficiencies and reduce GHGs in a home, in the homes that exist. So I guess my only comment, I fully support this staff report, and I have confidence that staff will keep an eye on ensuring that there aren't redundancies, because I think there are a number of initiatives that a lot of people have got their eye on and we hope are imminent coming down the pipeline, and to ensure that there aren't redundancies, or that we're laying out costs for things that would be better taken care of through a provincial kind of legislation or programming. So, yeah, I really look forward to the staff report on this, and I support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Ney. Anyone else? Councillor Braithwaite?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just wondering, I mean, I fully support the comments that I've heard so far from my colleagues, but I do have a concern of the staff time that it will take to get a report for this. So I'm wondering if staff have any indication on the time and resources, et cetera, and what else might have to fall off to be able to accommodate this, or if anything does.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. It is a very short timeline between now and our strategic planning and budgeting process. So, Ms. Varela, did you have a comment for this?
Thank you to Councillor Braithwaite for bringing that forward. I think, you know, as I look at the department and what council has currently put on their plates, the depth of analysis that council may be looking for around this item, just gearing up for a staff report, I actually probably see a high-level memo coming back to you first with some of those flags. The financial impact in the report before you does talk about these initiatives placing pressure on existing council priorities, current municipal operations, and/or property tax funding. So I think if we could come back to you and say, something has to come off if this is going on, and even to bring forward an in-depth analysis of the situation right now, you might not get the depth that you're looking for. But again, how much time does staff spend until we get the direction that you're actually interested in pursuing this? So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that clarification. Councillor Green, did you have any questions or comments on this motion?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, thank you, Mayor. I, too, am very supportive of the concepts and the ideas that are put forward. I share Councillor Braithwaite's concerns about staff capacity and balancing and juggling a lot of these priorities. But I fully support and appreciate the in-depth report that we received tonight. As well, I just want to make it clear that I think these are important goals and objectives. I think that a really well-integrated plan over time is important. I think environmental protection and climate change should be integrated into everything we do as a municipality. I certainly like the focus on transportation and housing and other aspects of land use. So those are all laudable goals. But again, I'm concerned just about the financial impacts and the staffing impacts. So thank you, and thanks to Ms. Varela for clarifying that.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Councillor Zalka, anything to add?
No further comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Patterson?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And following on what Ms. Varela has just advised Council, I would think that the wording of the second part of the motion, that Council, if we wish to incorporate it, staff be directed to bring back additional information on the process and resources required. Perhaps Ms. Varela could just advise if that wording then would suit what her description was of a high-level memo to come back to us about what this would require, or should we change the wording of this?
Ms. Varela?
I can read it for you if you'd like.
No, I think the microphone. Oh, it just came on there, Ms. Varela.
motioning away over here. I think the intention is clear. What I need is the ability to work with the director to talk about possibilities. And if we frame something up and council is willing to reprioritize what is currently on the department's plate. Again, when we talked about a 5-year plan and a work plan for council's term, we have acknowledged in multiple forums that the plate is full. So then it would be up to council to make those hard decisions and provide direction. So we can bring you back an analysis on which you can gain a little more traction to consider this further in the context of the upcoming budget.
Thank you, Ms. Rilla. Anything else? I'll just say my piece on this. I'm supportive of the motion as it's going forward. I have my reservations about how much we can do at this level, and particularly I think there's always this magical art of being supportive without leading too far in front. And I think Councillor Ney, alluded to the fact that the provincial government has quite a few projects and priorities related to some of the same items that we are, and getting out in front of those may not be cost effective, or maybe even be at odds with some of those initiatives. So I'm supportive of this to look at it. I think that we proceed enthusiastically where it makes sense and local, and then partner with the province and other potential agencies and regionally where it also makes sense. So I'm just happy to support this motion to get some sense of what that would look like, but I think I always sort of weigh that with a measure of caution at the same time. Any other comments? Do we have a motion on the floor? All those in favor? Councillor Green?
Yes.
Councillor Ney?
Yes.
Or Councillor Zelka?
In favor?
Thank you. That passes. And we are on to item number 5. Oh, sorry. Not item number 5. Recommendation number 5 of item number 5. Go ahead, Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to make the motion to direct staff to report back on the funding and resource implications of implementing recommendation number 5 for the purposes of the 2021 budget discussion.
That's moved. Is there a seconder? I'm not seeing a seconder for that item. So is there another motion on this? Then we do have actually, we don't really need a motion at this point. Councillor Green or Councillor Zelka, is there? If you're speaking, we can't hear you. I just want to. You don't have to speak, but if there's a wish to second, this is the time to do so. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda.
It's Councillor Zelka. Well, I don't wish to second this one. I would potentially consider seconding something with a later budget impact.
Well, we're here really to move this forward to this next strategic planning and budgeting session. So if there's no seconder, that's fine. That's the way this works. I will move on. There is anything else on this agenda item before we move on? Councillor Appleton?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just with respect, I had a similar inclination. Councillor Ney mentioned it, and it's been brought up. Just with respect to recommendation number 2, I just wanted to ask of staff, first of all, just how to phrase this. Again, as Councillor Ney pointed out, there is a potential ask of council to staff to bring forward a report outlining engagement options and relevant safety and resource implications. So as council will recall, work on the Cool Kit was deferred until 2021, which now we are almost in 2021. So clearly, any work to do with the Cool Kit needs to be done in full conjunction with COVID protocols and cannot be done any other way. So that with that clear understanding, I would still like to see us have more information in that regard. So if I may, I could make a motion to that effect. If this is the appropriate, I'm asking the question if this is the appropriate time and place to do so, or whether or not it should be brought back separately.
No, I think it's appropriate if you wish to make that motion to direct staff to bring back an update. This would be a totally viable place to do so. I guess the only caution I would put in that is, and maybe I'll get Ms. Vrella's input on this before you make the motion. Just trying to get a sense of where, or maybe even Ms. Jensen, where that report coming back would have the most value. I understand there's, Ms. Jensen outlined, there's webinars coming up, there's discussions happening, getting a report now. If there's a bunch of meaningful information coming in a month's time or 2 months' time, that might make sense. So I just want to make sure we're getting, if that's going to be the motion, that we're clear about the ask in terms of timing. Ms. Vrella?
Thank you, Your Worship. So currently that item is included in the budget as it sits right now. I think there's a couple things that we need to think about, both the ability to engage and the community's likelihood to be in receipt of and willing to participate in that. So I know this is top of mind for staff, and a report is intended back in the first quarter. Unless council directed us to remove from the budget or to alter the budget, right now it is anticipated to move forward. A subsequent report would be coming back because of the pandemic protocols, and we'll see how that shakes out in January.
Okay. Councillor Appleton?
Thank you, Your Worship, and this is valuable information because I'm not, and maybe I've missed it here, but just under recommendation number 2 in the staff report, it doesn't specifically address bringing back a report at a specific time. So I'm appreciative of the information Ms. Varela is providing. If that is the case, if I would potentially be asking for something that's already on its way, then I don't need to do that. But I didn't see that specific reference to an update on implementation of the Cool Kit item specifically at that time. So can I just confirm that?
Yeah, and maybe I can ask for even more clarification if I might. Obviously, there's a good chance that the form of the Cool Kit will differ from what was presented to council. And so I think it would not be unreasonable, given that we've approved the budget, but perhaps not the new form that might take. If that report could come back to kind of inform council before that rolls out more fulsomely, Ms. Vrella.
Certainly that's the intention behind the scenes, but staff would welcome a resolution from council, which would pop it up on the action list again as well.
Councillor Appleton, did you wish to make a motion to that effect?
Absolutely, Your Worship. Thank you. So I would move that staff be directed to prepare an options analysis for initial implementation of the Cool Kit program, considering COVID-19 limitations, and also a potential late 2021, quarter 4 of 2021 target for expanded community gatherings.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Before you motivate, I just want to make sure that last part doesn't cause any problems. If there's an earlier opportunity for larger community gatherings, or if that for some reason we can't have those gatherings, does that wording cause any problems?
Okay. Sorry, Councillor Appleton, if you have that written down before you, could you reiterate that?
Absolutely, yes. So that I'll just read it in full. That staff be directed to prepare an options analysis for initial implementation of the Cool Kit program, considering COVID-19 limitations, and also a quarter 4 of 2021 target for expanded community gatherings. And if I may, Your Worship, that my intent there is to say, working with the latest information from the public health officer that vaccines may be out to the general population by September of 2021, and hoping that is the case. And my intent with that language is just merely to say, I would like us to be ready to begin when we're given the clearance to do so, rather than to do so in contravention of anything. But we will be in the back half of 2021 before we know it. And I would sure like us to be ready to engage with the community again when everybody's raring to go and is able to do that.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. So it's moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this motion? Councillor Green or Councillor Zelka? I'm not getting an answer, so I'm going to say that there's no discussion. Yes, go ahead.
No comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Zelka. Thank you. So the motion's on the table. Any discussion? No more discussion. Thank you, Councillor Appleton, for that. I just want to make sure is that wording. I asked the question if it was okay, Ms. Varela. Is that satisfactory?
Absolutely. And if we have to, if Councillor Appleton wants to define it to a quarter and we have to amend, we'll just come back like we do anyway. But the intention is we'd bring back the staff report with possibilities and monitor, of course, the possibilities under pandemic.
Thank you very much. All right. There's no other hands. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Councillor Green?
Aye.
Councillor Zelka?
In favor?
Okay, thank you very much. Any other items related to item agenda number 5? Not seeing any. Thank you very much. And again, thank you to Councillor Appleton and all the members of the Advisory Planning Commission who put in so much work to bring these items forward. There are, after all, 14 items on that list, so we have more work potentially for us in the future as well. But I think I really appreciate the hard work of prioritizing the priorities for the council and the community. Next, item number 6 on the agenda is the 2021 meeting schedule. Ms. Williams, you've been instrumental in putting this together. Do you want to give a quick overview?
Thank you, Your Worship. The Community Charter and Council's Procedure Bylaw both require Council to adopt a calendar of regular meetings once a year. So the proposed schedule that I've presented today is here to meet that statutory requirement. Generally speaking, it follows Council's Procedure Bylaw with respect to the time and date of meetings as you've outlined in your bylaw. There are 3 exceptions to the schedule that I did want to highlight for you. The second Monday of September falls within the time frame that UPCM is scheduled to be held. So we've canceled that council meeting, anticipating that council members may wish to attend that event. The third Monday of February falls on the Family Day statutory holiday. That's a committee of the whole meeting normally. Staff has removed the committee of the whole meeting from the schedule, and at this time we're not recommending that it be rescheduled. And the reason for that is that the proposed schedule before you also includes 3 special committee of the whole meetings in February for financial planning and budgeting. And should we have items of business that are urgent, we can certainly piggyback onto those meetings. The last item that is an exception to your procedure bylaw is the bylaw doesn't anticipate meetings in December. Operationally, the practice in Oak Bay has been to take the second Monday of December and to have a joint committee of the whole council meeting. So that is reflected in the proposed schedule. The one thing I would ask council to consider before you adopt is the 3 special committee of the whole meetings that are scheduled for February. Typically, council has held those at 6 with a 6 p.m. start, so that's out of the ordinary. If you would like to continue with a 6 p.m. start, I would ask that we add the words to start at 6 p.m. to the end of the last clause of the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Williams. Appreciate the oversight or the overview of that to help clarify. Otherwise, it's just looking at a bunch of dates without a lot of meaning behind them. Just looking to council if there's any questions, we can take those. If not, we can take a motion.
I'll make the motion.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, I'll take it from Councillor Braithwaite since she's in the room here. Councillor Braithwaite, did you wish to add the 6 p.m. or not?
Yes, I'll add the 6 p.m. Thank you.
Okay, so it's moved with the 6 p.m. Is there a seconder?
Second.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Since there has been that amendment in particular, is there any discussion or questions on this item?
A comment from Councillor Zelka.
Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to, through you, to thank staff very much for being very clear on the agenda and for making it clear when the special committee of the whole meetings will be there for the budget. I very much appreciate having it all laid out. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Zelka. Not seeing any other discussion. I'm happy to call the question. All those in favor? And Councillor Green?
Yes.
Councillor Zelka?
In favor?
Thank you. That passes. Up next on the agenda is the 2021 acting mayor rotation and council appointments. This was a late agenda addition, so thank you, Ms. Williams and the administrative team for adding this so it's in our agenda packages. But I did circulate it as well to council directly. The motion here is for council to approve But of course, changes can be made at this table as well if there's a desire. Councillor Nay,
Second.
moved and seconded. Go ahead, Councillor Nay.
Just one thing, it's just a very minor edit, is that the CRD Arts Committee is actually a commission.
I am looking through here. It's the fourth one down. Thank you. I'm going from the bottom up. Always a bad idea. Commission. Thank you. So with that change, if that's the only mistake after all the edits on this, I'd be very pleased. So with that edit, I think that's just a minor thing. We don't have to change in the motion. Any other
A
discussion?
question from Councillor Zelka.
Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you very much, Chair. I very much appreciate this coming forward, and I do notice that the title is Council Appointments to Boards, Commissions, Committees, Foundations, and Liaisons. And because this is one of the very, very few times that the Yes Awards comes before Council, I needed to ask a question, and if I may, in particular, I wanted to ask clarity. Is the Yes Awards a board, a commission, a committee, or a foundation, or is it something else, please?
Thank you. I think it would fall only here under the liaisons piece, which is sort of a catch-all, but Ms. Varela?
That is a municipal award program, so it would speak to a liaison to that event.
Councillor Zelka?
So this is not a committee or commission? I just wanted to confirm as to whether for example, the committee or commission's policies applies to that sort of thing. I've always been confused. I've been on council for 6 years, and this one has always confused me. It's very important. I absolutely support it, and I would like to see it move forward. I'm very, very proud of recognizing the valuable work of recognizing the youth volunteers. But you know, it's our job to just make sure that things have good governance. So I just wanted to ask, does the committee and commission's policy apply?
Ms. Varela?
Thank you, Your Worship. So no, the Yes Awards is neither a commission or a committee, and it does not have terms of reference, nor does the policy apply.
All right. Thank you very much for that clarity. May I have one final question, if I may?
Of course.
I understand that the process is funded, I believe, exclusively by sponsorship. Do any of those funds flow in or out of district, I don't know, just bank accounts? And do we need to account for these on our financial statements? I just wanted to clarify this question with respect to governance, having to do with, for example, any liability we may hold.
Sure, and I may go to Councillor Braithwaite if necessary, because she started these and has been sort of running them with the adept assistance of Councillor Appleton for the last couple of years. But I think I might give this over to staff just for clarification of the funding model.
Thank you, Your Worship. So it is my understanding there is a standing item in the municipal budget as well as sponsorship. Director Payne is on the line. I believe he might have some insight as well.
Go ahead, Mr. Payne.
Yes, Your Worship. Ms. Friller is correct. There is a budget item for receptions if need be. However, the sponsorship revenue flows into the organization, and the offsetting costs also flow out. So the net impact of that is reported in our financial statements.
Thank you. Maybe I will go to Councillor Braithwaite here just for some history. I know that money's been in the budget as a backstop, but perhaps you could explain where and how often it's been used.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Yes, there is usually, I believe, and Mr. Payne can correct me if I'm wrong, but normally in every budget every year we allocate about $750 towards the Yes Awards, as the municipality is one of the major sponsors of the Yes Awards. However, I believe, and again, Mr. Payne can correct me if I'm wrong, but we have not had to tap into that money for probably the past 5 years, because of the wonderful generosity of our businesses within our community that put money towards the Yes Awards, and that covers all of the expenses.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. Mr. Payne, I don't know if you want to jump in and have the exact numbers for us.
Your Worship, don't have the exact numbers, but I can confirm just by reviewing last year's that that's in fact true, that the sponsorship revenue has certainly offset the cost. So there was no net contribution that the district made.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Councillor Zelka, did that answer the question?
That very much does answer the question. I very much appreciate all the work that's being done by the awards group. I can't call it a committee, and definitely want to see this move forward. One final question, if I may, and I'm not quite sure whether it's. Well, no, I guess this is the only time I can ask it, because it's the only time we speak about the ESSA Award. We don't seem to ever mention it in our annual report, or we don't. I couldn't find it in any of the annual reports. Is there a reason as to why it's excluded?
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. I don't know whether that has been essentially an arm's length piece of it. Councillor Braithwaite, perhaps you can answer.
I think that perhaps where you might find it would be on the Oak Bay Parks and Rec and Culture Committee website as a mention, because it is helped with a staff member from the Oak Bay Parks Rec and Culture Committee, and that's kind of where it all started when I was involved with them.
Councillor Zelka?
Well, thank you very much. I do apologize. I'm happy and just confused as to this one. From my perspective, it's just a little bit of opaque. So thank you so much for shining the light on this. I'm in favor of all of this moving forward. Thank you.
No, thank you, Councillor Zelka. You're right. We don't. It doesn't come to this table at all, generally speaking. So why not ask the questions when it's here? Any other comments or questions? Not seeing any. All those in favor? Councillor Green?
Yes.
Councillor Zelka?
In favor.
Thank you. And item number 8 on the agenda, we are going to the Public Art Advisory Committee Terms of Reference. I'm not sure if there's anybody wishing to, from staff, to speak to this. This is the final stage of a long process. I don't see any, so can I get a motion here?
Adoption?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this? I'm not seeing any.
Yes, it's.
Go ahead, Councillor
Sorry,
Green.
it's Corinne's. Thank you, Mayor. Just a question on this particular group. I noticed that the council liaison is a voting member. Is that because it's a select committee through you to staff?
Ms. Williams or Ms. Rella?
Yes, Your Worship, that is correct.
Councillor Green?
Okay, I'm just wondering, you know that I struggle with this issue, that council liaisons vote on these committees to which we provide advice. I wonder if you could explain, I guess I'm concerned about the potential for conflict of interest, also the potential for, coming back to council and also making a decision on something from the Arts Committee. Perhaps that may not be a problem, because I noticed you've referenced the community charter, but I have an ongoing concern about this particular piece. Otherwise, I have no other concerns. So I guess I just have to state my concern about the voting aspect on the part of the council liaison.
No, thank you, Councillor Green. I know it's come up at this table a number of times, and we've worked around it on the land use items and pieces and other commissions. Ms. Williams or Ms. Varela, would you like to speak to this particular as a select committee?
Thank you, Your Worship. The nature of the forum itself, because it is a select committee, a council member appointed to a committee of council has an obligation to vote. An abstention is a vote in the affirmative. So if you appoint a member to a standing or select committee, they are obligated to vote under the community charter.
Thank you. Ms. Varela?
And just to add another note for those who may be viewing, that is differentiated from a commission where there is not a voting capacity from the liaison.
Thank you. And I think if, this is still a fairly new committee of council, and we're still working out how it works in the long term. I think certainly the current structure, as we were approving it, makes a lot of sense. However, we might consider it in the long-term future, moving this more to an arm's length society or something of that nature, and have it run a bit more independently. That is always a possibility. But yeah, Councillor Green, you're correct. This is a requirement to vote on this committee.
I appreciate the clarity, and thanks to staff.
Well, thank you, Councillor Green. We have the motion on the table. Is there any other discussion? Not seeing any. I'm happy to call the question. All those in favor? Councillor Green?
Yes.
Councillor Zelka? Councillor Zelka?
Yes, consider.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Item number 9 on the agenda, committee and commission policy. I think I just want to go to Ms. Williams here for a quick overview and the changes that have come here for the adoption.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council has seen this document quite a bit over the past year. There was one amendment that was requested the last time it came before the group, and that was to have the council liaisons for the commission as non-voting members reflected in the policy. So that amendment has been made, and it is now ready for council's endorsement.
Thank you very much, Ms. Williams. I'm happy to take a motion and we can have a discussion.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
This is to the amended committee and commission policy be adopted for those watching at home. Any other discussion on this item? Not seeing any. I'm giving an extra moment here in case people have to unmute from their home office. Not hearing any. I will call the question. All those in favor? Councillor Green?
Yes.
Councillor Zelka?
In favor.
Thank you. Then we have item number 10 on the agenda, which is a Horizon report for the Cattle Point boat launch. I'm not sure who is speaking to this item. Is Mr. Haran or Ms. Williams or?
Thank you, Your Worship. At the most recent in-camera council meeting, council resolved to release this from its in-camera classification, so it's here before you now to make this information public.
Thank you. The report is there for everybody to see. Is there any, is there any questions? We can take those. Otherwise, we'll take a motion.
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you very much. And I don't see any other hands jumping up here for the conversation. I'm ready to call the question then. All those in favor? Councillor Green?
Yes.
Councillor Zelka?
Yes, in favor.
Okay, thank you very much. We move on now to number 11 on the agenda, which is new business and reports from other committees. Is there any new business? Is there a report on the Capital Regional District? Just so the council knows, there is the changes that were approved at this table in terms of moving the capital costs onto taxes and the operating costs onto the service fees from the CRD went through its the Governance and Finance Committee last week, and will be at the CRD board for approval coming up this week, with no expected challenges. Everybody seemed understanding of the changes, as it brings us more in alignment with the rest of the region as well. I also will be taking on the role of chair of the Governance Committee for the CRD for the next year or so. That has just come out in our agenda package for this coming Wednesday. And that pretty much summarizes my update for the CRD. Are there any other verbal reports from the table?
Yes, I have one, Mayor.
Go ahead, Councillor Green.
Just to let you know that Councillor Braithwaite and myself attended the Tourism Committee meeting on Thursday last, and we had a get-together over Zoom, and it was very pleasant. And again, tourism continues to struggle here. There are, ongoing concerns, but there's a real resilience among the members to keep plugging away at everything. And Councillor Braithwaite may also want to add her comments. She dressed as Santa for our gathering, and it was really great. Thank you.
Santa or Mrs.
Actually,
Claus?
it was Mrs. Claus.
I mean, Mrs. Santa, sorry.
I don't have quite the figure for Santa yet.
Sorry, I meant Mrs. Santa.
Thank you, Councillor Green. I saw Councillor Appleton's hand up.
Thank you, Your Worship. The last meeting of the library board took place the day after our last council meeting, so on November the 24th. Just a brief update that I think, as I've mentioned, the GVPL is moving to expand its hours and to try to extend hours on weekends as well. So trying to maximize the hours that they're open, responding to public inquiries and people's enthusiasm to get back into the building. I would extend my kudos to GVPL staff because, as council is aware, Dr. Henry's latest round of restrictions and specifications means that people there are greater restrictions in operating in an enclosed space like that. Everything that the library board staff have put in place was compatible, so didn't need to make any further changes, even though the restrictions were more restrictive. So that's due to their work. The library is working towards at least an initial rollout of access to computers. This is another thing that people have been missing. So the computers as are not accessible right now, but starting in January, they're going to be trialing limited access to computers. And if you haven't already seen it and reviewed it for your reading pleasure, the 2019 annual report went up a little. I think I was remiss in mentioning that's been completed and up. Everybody's favorite part of the year when the GVPL does their roadshow and their budget presentations to council has begun already. So expect that, I think, probably early in the new year.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Are there any other reports? I don't hear any. Oh, go ahead, Councillor Zelka. Yes.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to report out from the CRD Water Commission. Just to let the public know that the water quality summary reports are now available on the CRD website, and they're full of fascinating figures, and all showing that our system is in excellent shape and healthy. But I do encourage folks to go to the CRD website and look up the drinking water quality reports for further information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Zelka. Do one last look around the room to see if there's any other reports. Not seeing any. Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you for all your work that you do throughout the year at all these different bodies. It takes up a lot of time and energy and mental effort, so thank you for that. Item number 12 on the agenda is the Refuse Collection and Disposal Amendment Bylaw for adoption, for first 3 readings. If we get the first 2 readings, then we can have discussion.
I'll move the first 2 readings of the Refuse Collection and Disposal Amendment Bylaw number 4371, Amendment Bylaw number 4775, 2020.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. Is there any discussion on this? Councillor Appleton?
Questions, Your Worship?
Questions or comments? The motion is live on the floor.
Thank you very much. Through you to staff, if I understand the gist of this correctly, the increase is to offset anticipated additional staffing needs in 2021 potentially related to COVID, and then in subsequent years the increase would be used would be allocated in subsequent years to a reserve fund. Do I get that correct?
I believe that would go to Mr. Haran or Mr. Broziuk, who's on the phone with us tonight. Ms. Williams?
We have the Director of Finance, Mr. Payne is on there, and Mr. Haran from Engineering as well.
I'll let whoever wishes to answer.
Your Worship, I'll answer that question if it pleases the chair.
It does. Welcome, Mr. Payne.
And thank you for the question. This year when reviewing the budget, of course, there was the increase related to the increased service level for the organics or the garden waste curbside collection. But we believe that there's some cost savings to be had in the overall tipping fees in the budget. Had that been the only factor in the 2021 budget, staff would have likely recommended that those savings be used to create a transfer to reserve for facilities fund, since there is no dedicated funding for our facilities at the moment in terms of asset management. However, in 2020, we're seeing staffing costs exceed budget by about $50,000 in the solid waste division, just due to extra factors undertaken for COVID. We expect those to continue into 2021, and so we've kept the overall budget the same, including the tipping fees. And if things go back to normal, we expect those costs to fall.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Councillor Appleton.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick follow-up. Thank you for that. Through you to staff, just as a follow-up, the increased staffing that incurred by COVID around the solid waste management file, is that something that could potentially be funded through the provincial grant recently received? Would that be a qualifying cost for that?
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Mr. Payne?
Your Worship, yes.
Anything else, Councillor Appleton?
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I have one further question. I'll let the other councillors go ahead, and then I'll come back. Please come back to me.
I will do. Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Any other questions or comments on this? Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Mayor. And I apologize. I should probably know the answer to this, but if I could get a reminder on it. This bylaw amends section 14.1, and I'm just would like to understand, just to clarify, if the status of section 14.2 and 3, those are the clauses that specify collection of the charges in conjunction with the property tax collection, and we did change that so that it is no longer on the property tax bill but is on the utility bills. Did we also amend those clauses? The document that is on the website, the clauses still say that it's collected in the tax bill, and I know I've been getting some questions and there's some confusion, and I didn't directly remember if we also amended these clauses or not. So perhaps if that could be clarified.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. I think if nothing else, we can flag it here to make sure staff have a look and make sure that's done. Is there an answer ready at hand by staff? Mr. Payne?
Yes, Your Worship. The Director of Finance speaking again. Councillor Patterson is correct. Those clauses were repealed this year, so that the charge could be moved to the sewer utility, the water utility bill. And Councillor Patterson is correct. We have a more recent consolidated version of the bylaw. It's not currently on the website, so we'll make sure we'll put the most recent version, especially after this amendment is passed.
Thank you very much. I thought we had, but I just wanted to make sure that I got it from the sources.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Braithwaite?
Thank you. And I'm wondering if this might be the appropriate time to ask in regards to the billing of this. I know that we've had a lot of talk within the community about the bill that includes this cost coming in the month of December, and for some families that causes a struggle. And so I'm wondering if there's a possibility of us making this bill earlier on in the year so that it doesn't affect people right before the holiday season.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. Mr. Payne, have we ever looked at different options in terms of how and when we apply this? I think this actually was a special year this year, but perhaps you can answer that question.
Yes, absolutely, Your Worship, and I appreciate the question because it's a comment that we've been receiving in the Utilities Department frequently over the last couple months. And just so Council understands the process, we have a billing period 3 that everyone gets a third bill in the year, but when they receive that bill will differ because there's 4 different cycles. So someone might receive a billing period 3 in September, another person in October, and now we're into the November bills, and there will be one more cycle. So when people receive that bill, might or might not be close to Christmas. Now, the reason it happened this year was because we amended the bylaw partway through COVID we did not have enough time to get it onto the period 2 bills for everyone. So out of equity, we put it on the third bill for everyone. However, we fully recognize that came as a surprise to some folks, and around this time of year, not a welcome surprise. So part of the reason why this bylaw has been brought to council for amendment this early is so that the fee for 2021, we have the authority to charge it as soon as possible in 2021. And so staff are currently looking at the option of splitting that fee into 3 so that it can be charged out as part of every single bill, and therefore more moderated as opposed to it peaking. The part of the difficulty for customers as well was that this period 3 bill also usually includes the highest consumption charges of the year because it's summer consumption. So that on top of the fact that they're receiving the solid waste fee was problematic. We recognize that. So we'd like the ability to charge the fee split into 3 throughout the year, and this bylaw amendment would give us the authority to do that. The only outstanding question is operationally if we can make it happen with our software. We think we can.
Thank you very much for that answer, Mr. Payne. Go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
Just a follow-up, perhaps, through you, Mayor. And perhaps it would be good if we could somehow let that be known within the community, like through an article in Oak Bay News or something like that, just so that people become a little bit more aware and they don't have an expectation of getting one large bill, but rather it's separated out, and to show that the municipality is trying to hear their concerns.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. Are there any other discussion or questions on this before I go back to Councillor Appleton?
Councillor Zelka?
Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask a question through you to staff. Since the curbside organics will now include garden waste going forward starting in January, I imagine that this may reduce the number of people driving through to the way well, I call it the dump. I'm sure there's an official name for it, but the dump. Are we anticipating less traffic over there, or possibly some offset of cost savings? I just wanted to ask whether there was any anticipated change in a need for the hours or for a drop off to the dump.
Thank you very much, Councillor Zelka. This probably is a question for Mr. Haran, but Mr. Payne, if you have the answer at hand.
Thank you, Your Worship. And yes, I think it would be valuable for Director Haran to add any comments. But I do believe that's part of the analysis of why we expect that some of the tipping fees that would normally originate in the yard may go down as a result of them being at the curbside instead. Now, we don't anticipate overall budget savings until post-COVID, but that is our expectation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Haran, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'll just echo Mr. Payne's comments and say, we're expecting the end results to likely balance out, although we're kind of also taking an approach here to say that there's a handful of things that have occurred this year that we didn't expect. And so, the long lineups and just the popularity of the service that the transfer station provides in terms of yard waste drop off and recycling and garbage and so on. So that's part of the reason why the report talks about service levels being reviewed and endorsed by the council in the first half of next year. It's just that we're going to take a solid, fresh eye to everything that's happening in the next couple of months to try to make some recommendations of if status quo is acceptable and makes sense, or if we need to make some service level changes going forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. Haran.
That's very helpful. Thank you. May I continue?
Go ahead, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you so much, Chair. So I'm actually very happy to hear that in terms of some of the analysis. During the advertising time, the time where we're advertising this new program around curbside organics, including garden waste, I wonder if one of the advantages that could potentially be pushed is to reduce the use of cars making short-term trips off to our transfer station. In other words, it's slight, but hopefully measurable, or at least having an impact, reduction of greenhouse gases with respect to uses of cars. In other words, the one truck that runs around every 2 weeks might be enough to reduce the number of cars going to the transfer station. I would just hope that that somehow that this would help with that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Zelka. Councillor Patterson, you wanted to follow up on something?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just to staff, in the context of this report, when we talk about transferring to a reserve budget, specifically is this referring to facility replacement for the public works buildings, or is this a reserve fund, a reserve budget for facility replacement in terms of an asset management program for facility management for overall municipal buildings?
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Mr. Payne, I suppose?
Yes, Your Worship. It would be primarily for replacement of the facilities utilized by that service, because Council might recall that since this is a fee, the fee can only recover the cost of providing the service, which would include the replacement of the assets used to provide that service. So it wouldn't be advisable to include in the cost of that fee replacement of assets outside of that service. So that would be the idea there.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Councillor Patterson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Payne, for that information. That's very helpful. So even then, in the terms of the yard, the reserve fund then would be for facility replacement, specifically for all facilities that are used for processing the waste, the organics and the solid waste. Is that, like, I know there's more buildings there, so I'm just trying to grasp what specifics in the overall area are included in this.
Sure. I don't want to spend too much time on this because obviously it may not even exist. And but I think, Mr. Payne, maybe you can answer that question and perhaps the broader question of facilities reserves in general as well.
Yes, Your Worship, and it's a good question. And it's true that we haven't developed that transfer to reserve, so we haven't looked at it. But philosophically speaking, that's exactly what we would attempt to do, is quantify the cost of all the facilities utilized in supporting the service. Mind you, some of those utilities are used for providing other services as well, so it takes a bit of professional judgment. And ultimately, the funds raised by that user fee would most likely be placed in a general infrastructure replacement reserve. And so what's important is that the portion of the fee used cannot exceed the cost of the asset management considerations of that service, but it can be placed in a larger general infrastructure replacement reserve nonetheless.
Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Mayor, and I will leave it to the professional judgment of the public works staff to determine how it will be applied. Thank you.
I have a feeling it's going to be like $1.50 at the end of the year, and we're going to sort of wonder why we had this debate. But is there, Councillor Appleton, I might as well go back to you at this point.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I appreciate the indulgence, just because I'm trying to square up numbers here, and so I'm probably just misreading it, but I need a little bit of assistance. So, when we talk about tipping fees and sort of the net effect on tipping fees, I just note that in the report, in the salaries and benefits section, it talks about reduced tipping fee budgets being allocated to increased labor budgets for 2021, and I've heard tonight and in other discussions that we've had with respect to the revised curbside pickup, that tipping fees for the material collected from residences may be offset by decreased tipping fees because there's less volume going to the transfer station. But then I note in the cost driver analysis, it clearly says that there's an increased tipping fees from increased level of service at $59,000. So I'm having trouble squaring those things up in my head. It sounds like that there would be decreased tipping fees in 2021 to be offset by staff costs. But this budget line, this particular number doesn't indicate that. So I'm just, I don't want to beat the subject of tipping fees to death, but I'm just trying to line these numbers up.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Mr. Payne?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I understand exactly why that would be confusing the way that it's been put into the report. So the line that indicates a $59,000 increase for tipping fees, it only and specifically relates to the tipping fees that would be paid for the curbside collection of the new service, so garden waste. The tipping fees for other things, so the recycling depot, the solid waste, that's really embedded in the core budget and would be in the forced growth line item there. So essentially what I'm saying is that had COVID not been around, the forced growth factor there of $43,600 would have been a lot less. But we've maintained that forced growth budget higher in anticipation that the salaries budget will need to remain high to support the service under the current circumstances. So again, in summary, the tipping fee reduction that we're anticipating can occur would have reduced that forced growth line of $43,000 to a much lower amount.
Thank you. Is that okay? We have sort of shoulder shrugging in the room right now, but I think we're accepting of that summary. Anything else, Councillor Appleton?
Just for clarity, Your Worship, what's presented here is in subsequent years the allocation to a reserve. The creation of that reserve, is that a separate item that will be brought before council? Do we need to approve the creation of that reserve for that purpose?
Thank you, Mr. Payne.
Yes, Your Worship. It would be included in the solid waste budget coming forward, and it would be identified separately and subject to council consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Go back to Councillor Patterson once again.
Thank you, and Mayor, and I certainly appreciate Councillor Appleton's questions. This was a little juggling to understand it all, but I think part of the complexity is because we are trying to deal with the unusual circumstances of pandemic. I raised this before to Mr. Payne, the need to, for future budgets, be able to isolate some of those pandemic costs so that we're not building future budgets as a percentage of the budgets that included the pandemic additional costs. And so I am assuming, I guess, and perhaps I shouldn't, that Mr. Payne will be speaking to that as we are viewing future projections for budgets. Is that correct?
Mr. Payne, I know you've answered a similar question a few months ago on zero-based budgeting type approaches, which it sort of touches on as well. Could you answer the question in terms of how these changes and broader budget impacts this year will affect next year's budget and budgets going forward?
Yes, Your Worship, and it is my intention to identify in the 2021 financial plan what portions, if any, of the operating budgets and their increases are really due to COVID and therefore shouldn't be anticipated in a long-term financial plan. And on that note, I think it should have been more clearly identified in this report as well. So I absolutely accept that comment, and that's my intention for the 2021 financial plan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Payne. That's appreciated. Any other discussion on this item? I don't see any. I'll just go to the phone again in case there's any last-minute comments. Now we've had first and second reading motion made, so not seeing any further discussion, I will call the question. All those in favor? Councillor Green?
Yes.
Councillor Zelka?
In favor?
Thank you. And could we get third reading?
I'll move third reading of the refuse collection and disposal amendment bylaw number 4371, amendment bylaw number 4775, 2020.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. And we don't usually have discussion on third reading, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Councillor Green?
Yes.
Councillor Zelka?
In favor.
Thank you. Item number 13 on the agenda, the Advisory Planning Commission. If we can get the motion again, this is the first two readings of this bylaw.
I'll move first two readings of the Advisory Planning Commission Land Use Bylaw 4771 2020 Land Use.
Thank you.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this item?
Yes, Mayor.
Go ahead, Councillor Green.
Yes, thank you very much. And I apologize, first of all, to staff. I couldn't get my comments to them any sooner than late this afternoon. So both Ms. Varela and Ms. Williams have copies of my comments. And what I'm suggesting is a change to page 2, item 4.2 under membership of the Commission. And it is the second sentence of that clause where we target an age that that we will strive to have one member under 35 years of age. I actually think under the human rights legislation we cannot identify people by age specifically. So I have some wording as a suggestion to that second sentence to replace that second sentence, and I was wondering if you would like me to read the wording. It's not very long at all, and as I say, I have provided copies tonight by email to Ms. Williams and to Ms. Varela.
Sure. Before you read it out loud, I'm just going to allow Ms. Williams and Ms. Varela to pull it up so they can follow along on their devices. Ms. Williams, are you ready to hear the? You don't have that.
I do have it, yes.
Okay. When you're ready, I'll have her read it out for the rest of us at this table. Okay.
And I just want to add, I really appreciate all the work that Ms. Williams and her team have done on these commission bylaws.
Go ahead, Councillor Green, with your. I guess we'll make this as a proposed amendment to the bylaw.
Okay, my proposed amendment to clause 4.2 under membership, the last sentence, is the district shall strive to make appointments that are inclusive and reflect the community's demographic, gender, ethnic, and economic diversity, including representation from the small business, homeowner, and rental sectors. And I think that will capture that diversity that I think we were trying to reach with that first sentence, or that first version of the second sentence. So that's my suggestion, and thank you.
Thank you. So that's a motion made, and we'll get a seconder if anybody's interested.
I'll second.
Moved and second. Thank you. Before you motivate too much, I think it's a fairly clear, but amendments. I want to make sure that we're very clear about what's being moved here, and I would like to get input from Ms. Williams before we do this. Move it for any further.
Thank you, Your Worship. The proposed wording is there's no harm in switching out the wording, with the exception of the intent of the original clause may have been to ensure a member of the youth were on the commission, and the newly worded clause would not necessarily achieve that. Certainly, the district retains the ability to appoint whomever they wish and can make those appointments knowing what your original intent was.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Williams. And Councillor Green, I'm going to go back to you just to allow you to motivate, but I think it's worth noting that when this was originally put forward, the reason that was included in there was, it was aspirational. We couldn't dictate, but was to encourage people who are younger in age to apply who might not otherwise, seeing that there was actually a visible effort to include them. So perhaps you can address that in your motivation.
We could add the word youth, perhaps, then. And I completely agree with the intent of the original sentence, but I'm pretty sure we can't identify age per se. But I think we could certainly use the term youth. I think that would cover it. But I would want to hear from Ms. Williams on that.
It's if Ms. Williams is ready to go ahead.
Certainly, what Councillor Green is proposing is workable. We can certainly say, and one member from the youth in the community. We can add that wording to her proposed new sentence.
So can we just have the entirety read out again with that included, just so we're all clear? I'm not a fan of making changes, especially to bylaws on the fly, but just so we're all speaking.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. We can always come back to this at a future meeting if necessary, but and in fact, I might procedurally like to make this change and then wait. Maybe also, Ms. Williams, when you're answering this question, can you also answer procedurally, can we do first and second reading, go away with the changes, come back and contemplate third reading and adoption in the same meeting, or does the third reading have to happen separate from the adoption?
That's correct. Third reading and adoption have to be at separate meetings. Currently, there's an allowance for that for financial bylaws only, but not for a bylaw of this nature.
Okay, thank you. So then if you could read out that motion with the youth wording in it, is that doable? And apologies for those watching at home, you can't see Ms. Williams, but she's working off her mobile device to read this, making it a little bit more awkward in terms of the procedure.
Can I suggest, Councillor Green, that we reword it to say, the district shall strive to make appointments that are inclusive and reflect the community's demographic with a focus on youth, gender, ethnic and economic diversity, etc.?
That's great. Thank you so much. And again, my apologies.
Okay, I'm not going to take a motion that says an et cetera. Just because we didn't have the piece there, so if you could maybe, Ms. Williams, repeat that again, and we can get it written down very cleanly for this.
Thank you. I'm at about 1.5% battery.
Oh dear.
The district shall strive to make appointments that are inclusive and reflect the community's demographic with specific focus on youth, gender, ethnic and economic diversity, including representation from small business, homeowner, and rental sectors.
Thank you. Is that acceptable to you, Councillor Green?
That's excellent. Thank you so much for the consideration.
Okay, I had Councillor Ney, I think, as a seconder. I just want
Question of clarity.
Just a second, Councillor Zelka, just because when we're making changes like this, we just want agreement from the mover and the seconder. Councillor Ney, I had you down as the seconder. Councillor Ney, are you accepting of that wording? Did you second the original motion? I thought you did. Okay.
It's good enough for me. I could quibble with one part of it, but it's good enough.
Well, it's just to get it on the table,
Yeah,
so we can discuss it at this point. So it's now live on the table. And anything else you wish to add, Councillor Green?
No, thank you very much.
Okay, Councillor Zelka, you had your hand up, your virtual hand up.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm generally in favor, but I do need to confirm, certainly with the mover and seconder, this is to replace only the last sentence in section 4.2. And if it is only the last sentence, do we not need to include the word also in there? The district shall also strive, as opposed to what sounds like replacing the entire 4.2.
Thank you, Councillor Zelka. You are probably right, since the first part of it says strive and the second part should include the word also. That's a fairly grammatical change, so I think we can make that without any modifications. Any other discussions on this?
So just to confirm, it is the last sentence only that's being replaced?
That is correct. Yeah? It's the last sentence only.
All right. Excellent. Thank you.
Any other discussion, Councillor Appleton?
Thank you, Your Worship. Speaking against the motion, just both for the reasons that I'm not in agreement of making a change to the direction and the intent of the committee at this late hour in this type of format, first of all. And second of all, I would concur with your earlier comment. Having served on the Advisory Planning Commission, there was an intent to open it up and to deliberately engage with younger people. To my mind, the term youth is not adequate. And so unless, respecting what Councillor Green is saying about the limitations on actually specifying an age, staff have reviewed the document. If unless it can be shown to me that that language is not permissible, then I don't favor removing it. So my preference would be, if this is the desired wording, and if the will of council is to evaluate this wording, my preference would be to refer it back to staff in order that be confirmed and checked.
Thank you, Councillor Appleton. Councillor Ney?
I'm inclined to agree with Councillor Appleton for both the reasons. And I'm just wondering, I'd like to send it back to staff and ask them to think about it. And my point here, and I don't think we want to script this tonight, but I'm just wondering if the issue of youth, I'm finding myself uncomfortable using that word there. It doesn't quite fit. And I'm wondering if I don't even know if it's possible if we started to talk about diversity of and use age there and then yada yada, but it's just a possibility. But I'm not comfortable with the way it is right now, and I like the idea of referring it back to staff personally.
Okay, thank you. So procedurally, we're going to deal with the amendment unless it can pass or fail, or we can refer it back to staff. Those motion to refer is always possible. I just also would like to flag timelines on this. We are going to be putting out notifications to the body in short order here. So I think Ms. Williams.
Thank you, Mayor Murdoch. Can I suggest that council consider giving 3 readings to the bylaw as it was presented tonight? The bylaw is scheduled to come for adoption on the 14th, and then the recruitment process for the membership will start on the 15th. What staff will do in the interim is we will check and make sure that the one under 35 is not discriminatory language. If it is, we'll bring it back on the 14th for third as amended to remove that clause.
Procedurally, I'm fine with that, but we we now have a motion on the table to amend, and I would just like to go back to the mover of the amendment to see if that process is acceptable to the mover of these changes. Councillor Green?
Yes, the process is acceptable. I will withdraw the motion.
It has to be agreed to by the seconder. It's agreed to by the seconder. So the motion is now to amend is off the table. However, so the main motion is back for debate on the first and second reading. However, I understand from what Ms. Williams said here tonight verbally that that check will happen, and if there's a requirement for change to the wording, that will come back at the next meeting, and the wording as read into this moved and then retracted will be available to us in written form for us for consideration for change. Is that an accurate summary of the next steps here?
That is correct. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Williams. So that motion to amend has been withdrawn, so thank you. We're back to the main motion, the first and second reading of the bylaw as worded in the report. Any other discussion on this? I don't see any. I'll just add my comment here of thank you, Councillor Green, for flagging this. I think it's important that it's part of our duty is to make sure that we're looking over these things with a careful eye to make sure that we're capturing both the intent of this body but also the broader guidelines provided by other levels of jurisdiction and legislation. So no harm in asking that question ever. So thank you very much for raising it. With that, we're back to the main motion, first and second reading. All those in favor? Councillor Green?
Opposed.
Councillor Zelka?
In favor.
Okay, so that has first and second reading. We'll do third reading now, and then we'll come back at the next meeting. So get move.
Move third reading of the Advisory Planning Commission Land Use Bylaw 4771.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. We don't normally have discussion on third reading, so I'll just call the question. All those in favor? Councillor Green?
Opposed?
Councillor Zelka?
In favor.
Thank you very much. So that will come back, and thank you, staff, for undertaking that research in the intervening time. And we have now item number 14 on the agenda.
I'll move first and second reading of Advisory Planning Commission Design Panel Bylaw number 4772, 2020.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you very much. Is there any discussion or questions on this item? If anybody on the phone is speaking, we can't hear you, but if I don't hear anything, I will go ahead and call the question. I don't see any discussion on this item, so I will call the question. All of those in favor? Councillor Green?
Yes.
Councillor Zelka?
In favor, thank you.
Thank you. And we got third reading.
Move third reading of the Advisory Planning Commission Design Panel Bylaw number 4772, 2020.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. All those in favor? Councillor Green?
Yes.
Councillor Zelka?
In favor?
Thank you. Item number 15 on the agenda is the adoption. We've done first, second, and third reading of this bylaw. Just need a motion to adopt.
Move that the sewer user bylaw, charge bylaw number 4392, amendment bylaw number 4776, 2020 be adopted.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Thank you. We don't normally debate on adoption, but it's always possible if anybody wishes to speak to it. Not seeing any, I will call the question. All those in favor? Councillor Green?
Yes.
Councillor Zelka?
In favor, thank you.
Thank you very much. Just need a motion to adjourn.
Move adjournment.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Councillor Green?
Yes.
Councillor
Yes, yes, yes.
I hear both yeses. So that we now conclude the meeting. Time is 8:56. Thank you everyone for your time tonight. Just a reminder, we have to follow very strict protocols with masks,